everybody, it's Femtrooper, and today we're going to be talking about the 25th anniversary of the Super Nintendo. It's really crazy that the Super Nintendo has been out now for 25 years in North America. It's kind of crazy and making me feel old, but I have had my Super Nintendo for a long time. I believe I got it in 1993 or 4. I don't remember, to be honest. I definitely had it in 94, I believe. I think I was, yeah. That makes sense. I didn't get it right away when it was released because I would have been too young. But I did have it for a good part of its lifespan, and to this day is my very favorite console. My favorite modern console is the 3DS because it just has everything on it, but that's why I like the Super Nintendo. It has everything on it. You can play amazing platformers. There's great RPGs. There's just great sort of side-scrolling action games. It kind of has everything. The Super Nintendo was a great console, and that's why it's my favorite, and tie that in with the fact that it's my first console ever. I did have a Game Gear a long time ago. I still have it. I'm not sure, to be honest, which I got first. They were around the same time. It was a Game Gear and a Super Nintendo. But either way, I treat this as my very first console. And this is my original console still. Why I put a Cocker Spaniel sticker on it means nothing, because I never had a Cocker Spaniel. I had like all these like stickers when I was a kid, and that's the one I chose to put on it. And I've always wanted to take it off, but I can't, just because it's been on there for like over 20 years that I won't take it off. So I don't know. One thing I'll add about this console is the fact that it still works perfectly. This is a great console for reliability. It's a brick, literally, and it still works. So give it that. With all the old consoles, they're like that, updates and stuff. But this thing works awesome. It was really well designed, and although it doesn't look, I think they tried to make the N64 look a little bit more futuristic. It wasn't as boxy. It was a bit more round and curved. I think they were trying to be more futuristic. The N64 to me is actually kind of ugly, versus this to me, this is actually a nice looking console. So I do have a Super Nintendo Memories video that I put up like 4 years ago. So I'll put a link to it right here so you can click on it and check that out and compare with what I'm about to say, because it was a nostalgia memories kind of video like I'm doing now. But today I'm just basically going to talk about all my favorite games for the Super Nintendo, mostly nostalgic games. There are a couple Super Nintendo games that I have played recently that don't hold nostalgia per se, but are still important and really good games for the Super Nintendo. You won't see me talk about games in this video like Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past or Mega Man X, just because I haven't really played those games through. And with Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, it's a game I really do want to play. A Link Between Worlds really got me into that style of Zelda. These are games that, although majorly insanely popular, they weren't games I rented as a kid. And when it comes to renting games for the Super Nintendo, I was young, and I picked a lot of games based on the cover. And a certain game that I'll talk about in a second, I never ever played because of the cover. So that game was actually Final Fantasy VI, would have been Final Fantasy III here in North America. I own the Japanese copy, but I don't own it for the Super Nintendo, obviously the North American release. It's a game that I have beaten. I played it on the Vita through the PSN, and I own this on the PS1 and this one here. But like I said, I never played it because the Final Fantasy covers back in the 90s were really, they kind of just said Final Fantasy. And so when I'm, a 6-year-old kid and I'm going to play games, I'm going to Blockbuster and I'm going to go rent a game, when I saw that, it meant nothing to me. It didn't even make me want to, turn around and check out the back and see screenshots. I just never did. So you're more interested in things with what you're familiar with, or so like movie games like Aladdin, stuff like that, or Mario games. So I never actually played a Final Fantasy game until the PlayStation 2 era. Please do not hurt me. a huge part of the Super Nintendo was renting games, and that was at Blockbuster for the most part. Obviously, just because it was a huge chain, there were Blockbusters everywhere. In Canada, the competitor was Rogers Video, and they were everywhere as well. So we went to Rogers Video and Blockbuster, and then all the little independent places. There were tons of those too, and so we'd have memberships to like everywhere. And I remember I had like Blockbuster. I think the two closest Blockbusters to me, I had the numbers memorized, and I would call them, and there'd be a game that I was really wanting to play. And so I would call them, hopefully they could put it on hold. And I used to get so hardcore, I know I've mentioned this before, but I think it's funny just because I feel like not a lot of kids did this. I used to see what the serial number was on the Blockbuster case, because say they had, like a popular game like this, they would have, let's just say 15 copies of it. I'm just making things up. But the copy I wanted was serial number ... And, if I wanted to actually continue with my save, I would get the serial number on the Blockbuster case and see if they had that specific Legend of Zelda game, and then that way I could continue on my save, unless some asshole kid deleted it, which was totally, that happened. But yeah, that's just a huge part of it, was renting, and I used to do that because there would be certain games where it's like, I would either it'd be my save, or there'd be a save on another game, like a platformer, where all the levels were beaten. So you wanted that save so I could play all the levels, instead of have to play from the start. So that's really why I did that. But yeah, I used to call around and like, oh, which video store will have what, and it was such an exciting thing to rent a game. We never didn't have like a rental from a video store, whether it was a movie or a video game. I always almost had some kind of video game rented, and that was almost, I would say that was up to sort of the PS2 era. After that, you could still rent PlayStation 3 games and stuff, but I kind of stopped renting at that era of game, that gen. But yeah, Super Nintendo, absolutely. Same thing with N64, and then up into the PlayStation 2 era is when I was renting games. One game that really sticks out to me that I rented and fell in love with was Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, a game that I've always held really highly, and finally just beat. I think it was it last year or the year before? Whatever. I recently beat it, which was amazing, because it was one of those games that I remember renting, and I rented it, I think, for the first time with my grandma at a Rogers Video. She used to drive there with me in her huge boat of a car, and she would drive to Rogers, and then she would always get me a rental. And the one thing that was a painful thing, and anyone who remembers renting games or movies remembers, that when you rented a game or a movie, you had to return it at the same store that you rented it from. So when I went to my grandma's, and she lived closer to downtown and we lived out in the suburbs, if I rented a game at the Rogers Video there, my dad used to be like, oh, because then he would have to drive it back there, like when I went to school or something. And my dad also used to rent me games when I went to school. He would drive me to kindergarten, and I would say, oh, I really want this game. And then after he dropped me off at school, he would head on over to the closest Blockbuster. And then when I got home, there would be that beautiful Blockbuster case or Rogers case. Very exciting. So, yeah, Super Mario RPG, I remember going to Rogers and renting, and I believe they had a huge cutout, kind of like when you go to like the theater, or even at places like Walmart, they'll have big cardboard cutouts for big things like Star Wars or whatever. And they had like a Super Mario RPG cutout because it was a big game, and it was a big deal because it was a mix kind of between Final Fantasy and Super Mario, which was kind of a weird thing, but to me it wasn't weird because I'd never played Final Fantasy, and like I said, I don't know which came first, Earthbound or Super Nintendo, but this is definitely one of my very first RPGs, and the whole concept, the aerial view, the concept of picking your moves, and also the concept of walking around in a town and talking to random people, and just I really got excited about going. It felt very like you were on an adventure versus the other games that were side-scrolling action adventure games, that may be based off a movie or something, or the Star Wars games. Those games to me were just, there wasn't so much, it was just kind of like a level. It was like you played the level. That was it. Versus the RPGs felt like an actual story. There was tons of dialogue. I remember getting really fascinated. Maybe I didn't understand what was going on, but I remember definitely being interested. I can't not talk about the Super Nintendo, though, without talking about the very first game I ever put in the console, and that's F-Zero. I found my Super Nintendo in the closet. My parents bought it for me for no reason. I don't remember their reason. I don't believe it was a birthday. It wasn't Christmas. I found it in the closet, and it was huge. This just upright black box. I was so small, like 4 or 5, and I remember thinking like I don't know what's happening, but I'm really excited. And at that age, I think, like, how would I even have known it existed? Maybe at a friend's house? I doubt it. I may have seen commercials, though. I was a commercial baby. I used to just sit and watch commercials. Like, hey, if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, chances are all you did was TV. So anyway, F-Zero, my parents set it up, and I remember them setting it up in my parents' bedroom on the TV there, and wow, just really, really exciting. I remember this, going in the console, and the music to this gets me really nostalgic because, like I said, it's pretty much my very first video game, so I hold it pretty highly. F-Zero is a good game. It's not a game I play very much because I sort of can only take so much of it, but it is really good, and the music is awesome. So F-Zero, thank you for kind of, I guess, getting me into video games, because I obviously liked it. Now, I can't talk about Super Nintendo games and leave out these 3 amazing titles. We've got Super Mario All-Stars, which gave me my NES fill, if you will. And then we've got these 2 excellent games, Super Mario World and Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Both amazing games. Super Mario World, though, is probably my very favorite Mario game of all time. I know a lot of people would put Super Mario Bros. 3 in that. But again, which I had on here, because I never had a Nintendo, but I got a lot of, these are all the NES games, which was nice. So I at least grew up with those through Super Mario All-Stars. So what a great idea that they did to port it to the Super Nintendo, because they look better, and just a really great idea, because those, oh my god, so many Christmases, and my grandma's playing that with my cousins, and Super Mario World. And this one, Super Mario World 2, which is a fantastic game. I still like Super Mario World, the first one better, but I really like this one. And wow, it really annoyed everyone because of crying baby Mario. Sticking to the theme of Mario Paint. This was another game that I played constantly, and the themes that they would play while you were using the mouse and doing things are kind of embedded in my head forever. And it was just, I don't know, it was an excellent game. It was really fun. It had like mini games. You could just paint and screw around with it, and then you could also make music, which was also super fun. And wow, I just hours and hours of that. It's crazy just how much time went into Mario Paint. When I was little, I obviously had the Super Nintendo, but a big part of playing the Super Nintendo, and when I think of the Super Nintendo, I think about it at home, I think about it at friends' houses, but I also, a big time, and I'm only child, remember going to my grandma's house and playing it there, because I had a stay-at-home dad, but whenever my dad had to do errands, or he used to play hockey a lot in the mornings, he would just, before he did that, he would go drop me off at my grandma's house. So I never ever had to experience daycare, because my dad was always at home, or if he was busy or had to do something, then I had to go to my grandma's, and I loved going to my grandma's, but my dad always made sure that even when I was really little, like 5 and 6, I knew how to set up my Super Nintendo so that he could just drop me off. He didn't have to hook it up to her TV. She didn't have to learn how to deal with it. I knew how to set up my Super Nintendo by myself, and I remember just going there and playing so many of all these games. Super Mario World, Mario Paint, and all of these amazing games right here. We've got all the Donkey Kongs. These are phenomenal games, but I think about my grandma's house, because I used to bring my Super Nintendo in this Lion King backpack and this weird awesome vintage kind of suitcase from like the 50s. My dad always used to put my Super Nintendo in, and I put all my games in it, and I used to go to my grandma's and play all of these, and she used to just let me play all the games whenever I wanted, whatever. And so I really do kind of when I think of my Super Nintendo, I think about my grandma a lot. So kind of, it's a lot of nostalgia in one, because not only did I play it there all through the year, but during Christmas, we used to all go to my grandma's, the entire family. Her house was the house everybody went to. And my cousins used to come, and I'd have my Super Nintendo, and they'd help me. They were older. They'd help me beat different things, and we'd just sit there and play Donkey Kong, or we'd play Super Mario World, or any of these games for hours and hours, and it was my very favorite thing. I couldn't wait till Christmas because of playing games, and then later on it ended up being N64, etc., etc. But Donkey Kong Country 3 is my favorite out of the three, what's funny is I used to play this game right here all the time, Street Fighter 2. I think it was this one. I'm not sure. I know there's a million different Street Fighter 2s, but this is the one I have. And I believe it was this one. I'm not 100% sure, though. But we used to rent it a lot, and my parents used to play it all the time. And I remember getting it for Christmas one year. Probably 96 Christmas, I believe. 1996 Christmas. And I remember getting Street Fighter 2, and I remember thinking, you know what? I'd actually probably rather this instead, because, believe it or not, I was a weird kid. I was like, Street Fighter 2 is maybe a little age inappropriate. Who says that? Like, what 6-7-year-old says that? Whatever. Kids are weird. But I think that's the reason I didn't want it, because I thought, honestly, if I'm going to have a game, and I don't get them very often because games were really expensive and your parents weren't just shelling out like $80 games constantly, I said, no, I really want Donkey Kong Country 3. Please get me this. This is like the best. So Donkey Kong Country 3 it was, and again, some of these memories might be a tad skewed, but whatever. Donkey Kong Country 3 is what I got, and to this day, it's my favorite one. It's the easiest one, and maybe that's why, just because it's easy. You can go through the whole game. It's challenging, but it is possible. Some of the other games are ridiculous because, like I said, you have to go through 3 or 4 levels before you actually can save. And sometimes that is just honestly painful. But this one, there's always Wrinkly's Cave is always somewhere you can go save. And that's probably why at Christmas we used to get so far into it. And I remember my cousin Steven used to, he got really far and he would beat this. And then when he'd go home and then all throughout the rest of the year I could play all the levels because I wasn't as good as him because I was a little kid. But yeah, Donkey Kong, these music to all of these games are amazing. I also love this one because of the awesome previously played game from Blockbuster. I don't know. I don't have that many things that have Blockbuster stickers on them, but this is definitely some proof that Blockbuster was a thing. Another game that I remember playing all the time was Pocky and Rocky, which is surprisingly rare at the moment. I found this at a garage sale when I was like, I don't know, 12 or something. I was biking around the neighborhood, and I remember seeing somebody selling it for like probably $5 or $2 or something stupid, and I was like, oh my god, yay. This cartridge works sometimes. I can get it to work, but it is questionable, which kind of sucks, but when I do get it to work, it's fun. It's a very unique game, but it's not as good as it was when I was a kid, but I have like school things where we used to have to write things, and I would draw myself playing Super Nintendo, and I would write things about Pocky and Rocky. So it clearly stood out to me, but again, it's not as good as I remember it being, but it is a fun game. It has really good music and really good visuals. I have saved the last game that I'm going to be talking about. Yes, there are a ton of games I played for Super Nintendo, and I own way more than what I'm showing you. I'm just showing you the key games that were nostalgic to me or that I've played or whatever. There are other games I have that are good, but I can't talk about all of them, obviously. But there's a reason I have saved this next game for last, and I think everyone knows what it is, and it needs no introduction. There's a bunch of parts to this one, but we have got Earthbound, my favorite game of all time. I seem to bring it up in every video because everything gets compared to this absolutely just gem and genius of a game. It is honestly, this is the well, obviously it's my favorite game, so I think it's the best game. I know there are other people who would prefer, other games, obviously, but Earthbound is my very favorite game of all time. This game, when you went to Blockbuster, all the games on the shelves, they were I don't have one on me right now, a Super Nintendo box, but they were, I want to say 40% of the size of this. They were smaller, and they'd all be on the shelf, and you could, there'd always be the rental case behind it. But this game was huge on the shelf, and something about it, I was kind of like, whoa, like, what is that? It's huge. I definitely need to check it out. And then on the back, there's some pretty interesting stuff going on there. Like, what is this game? I don't even know why, but I definitely rented it a lot. And I remember one save always was in 3'd. I would rent it from, like, Blockbuster, and it'd always be in 3'd. And now, God, I think back and I go, when they were selling these off for, like, $20 in the previously viewed, like, can you imagine? Because this combined with this and combined with this is worth a lot of money. It's like $600 or could even be more now. I honestly, I don't keep up with how much Earthbound is nowadays because I would never, ever, ever sell it. And I mean, my case isn't in perfect condition. I mean, it's beat up in a lot of places. I still have it, but it's definitely not perfect. And my Earthbound case, because I'm an idiot, my cartridge has faded because I used to keep it on display in the living room right where the sun beat down on it, and now I keep this in a drawer sealed away from everything because I don't want this to disappear. So this has faded enough. That's terrible, but I always keep this on display because this is the best. I rented this all the time. The music is the most nostalgic music of all time to me. I listen to the soundtrack a lot, like several times a week, which might be freakishly weird, but I definitely, constantly listen to it. I remember renting this game, and when you rented it, they always used to give you the instruction booklet if they still had it, if some kid didn't steal it or whatever. They did actually give you this. I remember renting it, and this came with it, which was pretty cool because I used to I couldn't even believe it. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something neat, but you'd be playing the game, and then it was just so interesting, everything that's in here. I'm trying to find one that's like, yeah, here we go. So instead of a normal player's guide where they say, here, go here, go here, go here, you'd have to go, say, to the town of Onit. But they made it seem like it was a real place. So there's all the shopping guide information, like what Onit is like. There's like a fake newspaper article. Really creative. So I remember, you'd rent this, and I would think, like, wow, what an interesting thing. I couldn't even believe it. Like, there's another one. Some more information. And then they'd list everything in here that you can buy at the store. Like, here we go. Snowwood Drugstore. So you can... It lists everything. I don't know why, but that was the most intriguing thing to me at the time. And although I barely got anywhere in that game, I relied on someone having a different save or whatever, because too young... I don't know, it always stuck with me. And then when I was a little older, probably, I want to say 12 or 13, I got a craving one day, because at the time, I think only N64 was out. I don't even know if PlayStation 2 was out. Whatever. I got a craving for Earthbound, and I thought, oh my god, I want to buy it. I want to get my Super Nintendo set up. My old Super Nintendo has only been like 4 years, but at that age, that's a long time. From going from like age 8 to 12 is a big deal. Now it feels like yesterday, 4 years ago. But yeah, I used to rent it all the time, and I had such nostalgia for it, even at a young age. And I thought, I don't own Earthbound. I should definitely own it. So I remember calling it still exists, still in Calgary. It's called Video Game Trader. There's 2 locations, and I called them, and I said, hi, do you have Earthbound? And they were like, yeah, we do. And they had it in box with the player's guide and, obviously the cartridge. And they were selling it for, I've sort of ripped it off because I tried to get it off, but I couldn't without damaging the case, so I've just left it there. But $59.95 is how much they were selling this for in box about 16 years ago. And I thought, oh, that's so expensive for a Super Nintendo game, because so many Super Nintendo games, like, you could just find this stuff for, like, so cheap at that time. And it was like, whoa, like, I don't have a ton of money because I was, like, 12 or something. But I think I had saved up money from, like, delivering papers and that kind of thing. So I remember we drove up to Video Game Trader, and they had it on hold for me, and I purchased it. And I remember getting excited, I played it and whatever, and then it kind of sat, and then over the years I've sort of, it's slowly developed into like some creepy obsession because I just love Earthbound so much. But either way, and I have finished the game, obviously now I've beat the whole game, back then I had not, and it just holds, it's the best game to me, it's my favorite game. And now I think, wow, I am so glad that like 12-year-old me went out and bought it at that store, because now that store, if they had it, which I don't even think they do because we go there sometimes, if they had it, they would be selling it for like $700 or $800, and I think, oh, you sold it to me for $60 in box. It's kind of hard to believe because you'll always see this at a convention. You'll always be able to find Earthbound cartridges, but if you actually see it in box, geez, it's at least $600. I don't think anyone could get away with selling it for less than that at this point, which is sad. Because there are games that I don't have, like Earthbound, that I would like to own, like Evo is another game that's cool, and I remember renting, thinking it was kind of different, really cool, and it's like, I can't afford to get a real copy of that, which is why reproduction carts come into play, and this is why I have Sailor Moon, Another Story. It's a reproduction cart that I got, because this is a game they have never released in English, but it's an RPG, and it looks really cool, so I definitely have to play this soon, just because it kind of has every single element that I like. RPG, Sailor Moon, super fun. I'm really excited. But that's why reproduction carts are cool. However, you can buy Earthbound now on, obviously, the Virtual Console for like $10. So I advise anyone who has not played Earthbound to do that as soon as possible, because it truly is a masterpiece of a game that's what the Super Nintendo, to me, is all about, is games like that and memories like just hanging out at Blockbuster and getting awesome games, and, you know, playing Donkey Kong Country 3 all night at Christmas, and just, I don't know, there's so many memories I have with the Super Nintendo. The N64 has a ton of memories too, but because the Super Nintendo was so, it had everything. It just had a lot of variety, versus the N64 didn't have as much, although I do have a ton of nostalgia for that because it was a little older, so you start to kind of figure things out a bit more and you're better at playing video games. But Super Nintendo, first console, you can't really beat that, and all these games are absolutely phenomenal. And yes, I haven't mentioned Chrono Trigger, but that's because I don't own Chrono Trigger for the Super Nintendo. I don't have any nostalgia with it. I'm starting to get more nostalgia for it now. I think I beat it in like 2012, I think. But it is a phenomenal game, in my top 5 games of all time, probably, honestly, or at least top 3 RPGs. But I'm not talking about it just because I never played it for the Super Nintendo. It was a DS. The DS version is what I played. But I won't count it out. Chrono Trigger is a phenomenal game for the Super Nintendo. Yes. So those are my memories with the Super Nintendo. Just freaking awesome system. The best system ever. So 25 years. It makes sense, but it is kind of crazy because you're like, wow, I can't even believe this system was released 25 years. And the best part is these cartridges, they work still, and they're awesome, and I rarely have issues. And if there is an issue, you blow on them and they work. I don't care if that's a myth, but everybody did it and somehow it worked. The Super Nintendo truly is an absolutely amazing console, and if you don't have one and you really want to get one, I urge everybody to just go to a pawn shop, buy one for $80, get the Super Nintendo. It's worth it. These games are really expensive now, but some of them are honestly super worth it, especially the games that you cannot get on Virtual Console. It's great to own these on the original cartridges. It's just such a great console. I can't say enough about it. So happy 25th anniversary to you, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES, the SNES, however you prefer to say it. The Super Nintendo is my childhood, so I hold it in high regard. It is the best. I will see you guys later, and please give me a like, subscribe, and leave a comment about your Super Nintendo memories and why you love the Super Nintendo. I'll see you guys later.